Okay, here on 3D Radio, very lucky to have on the end of the line Bobby from Overkill. Bobby, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, what do you say, Mal? This is Bobby Blue from Overkill, and yes, I am proud to be loud.
Excellent. Let's get into it. Now, you guys formed around 1980 in New Jersey, still going, 17 albums, 3 EPs, 3 live albums. How do you do it?
Well, we're running from the police. This is the idea. We're trying to stay mobile, and the touring helps with that. It's funny, though. If you think about, the idea that this was, something like a kid's project back in 81, cover songs, new wave of British heavy metal, and, the American punk rock and some of the British punk rock, and it all came together, and then, thrash happened, and then, decades later, we're becoming old farts that it still has relevance. I say to myself that, this scene has value, or that value we saw in it as kids, even though we couldn't define it at the time. But a love of, and obviously, we're opportunists to be able to grab those opportunities and squeeze the living hell out of them. And I think, you put a few of those kind of characteristics or personality traits together and you get Overkill.
Awesome. Now, you were one of the earliest thrash bands that was signed to a major label, which makes you pioneers in my book. Now, how do you feel about being labelled pioneers?
I don't know about that. When I said we were running from the police, I was obviously kidding, but there was something about this that almost seemed criminal. To be at a major label for us was, to be rubbing shoulders with the Aerosmiths of the day, or other bands that were in the Rhea family at that particular time. This didn't make sense to us. Because I think that this was about being the voice in the dark and that angst and that, let's do something different than what we all know with regard to what popular music is. And, it's been redefined by some of the bands in the genre, and some of those real pioneers like Metallica have redefined that definition of pop. But I think what Overkill's always done is kind of kept that purity to what it was all about at the beginning, we were the middle finger and a quick stomp and played louder and faster. We just happened to get better along the way and learn to love it as the seconds passed more and more. And if you look at it that way, looking back on it, you say, well, for God's sake, then of course it lasts 30 years if you love it from minute to minute and you look at the next opportunity. But thinking from back then into the future was an absolute impossibility.
Excellent. Now, like I said, your first full-length album back in '85, a really strong groundswell of major thrash bands at the time. I mean, you've already touched on it. What was it like to be part of that movement?
Well, it was great because, and again, looking back, because you don't know you're part of a movement until after it's actually labeled a movement. But the thing that I remember the most about it was that there was no rules. We were loving it from second to second more and more. The idea was that the rules were being created from second to second, minute to minute, day to day. So I think that was the kind of the cool thing about it, that it was really kind of a ruleless scene, a ruleless little society within a society, We were kind of the anti-metal. And not just us, but, guys I know to this day that are still doing it. Gary from Exodus, or Dave from Megadeth, or, James, et cetera, down the road, the Death Angel guys, the Anthrax guys, the smaller bands like Whiplash that are still doing it. I remember Carnivore that turned into Typo Negative. There was no rules.
Yeah.
That was the beauty of it. It was, I think we embraced anarchy for a reason that we didn't know, but I think at the end of the day, we actually, there was actually a heavy metal or thrash metal pioneer Bible written with regard to the do's and the don'ts. But I think that was fantastic back then because you didn't know what the hell was going on. You were just finding out as you as you woke up the next day, what was the new thing? And I think to some degree that is probably a great basis to what we have, in 2014 and White Devil Armory is the fact that, sure, the rules have been written, and we enjoy where we are, but based on that ruleless period of time.
You were from the East Coast. Did you tour the West Coast much back then?
Oh, we used to only stop out there to piss in the ocean. That was it. That was the only reason we would go out there. Of course. No, of course we did. Our first American tour was Slayer. I mean, obviously pioneers, if we're going to use that word as the theme of the interview. But and these guys were friends of ours. They came to the East Coast and they'd done a show on Long Island, and we got on that show, and that's how we became friends. And Overkill was coming about, and Slayer was, a phenomenon at the time.
Yeah.
And I remember driving from, the New York, New Jersey area out to Seattle, Washington, as far as you can just about go in the United States. And got in a few accidents in our camper, and et cetera. Drank beer all the way along, threw beer cans out, and that whole anarchistic long thing. And we were so excited about hitting that damn stage. And we got on the stage in Seattle, and we got hit with a hail of pennies and hairbrushes and cigarette lighters, right? For fuck's sake, we didn't understand what the hell's going on here. But the reality is that Slayer had been around already, and they were a phenomenon at that time. And we were kind of the new kids on the block with regard to this. So it was a proving ground. So, if you're liking it to the Roman Colosseum, with everybody putting thumbs up and thumbs down. But and to this day, people ask me, they say, why does Overkill have energy? I said, for Christ's sake, I was trying to dodge lead pipes on the fucking Slayer tour. You can't hit a moving target.
Now, your second album, that included your first music video. How important was that music video to Overkill's career at that time?
Well, again, always looking back. At the time, I had no idea. I was just happy. As my father said, you left the university for free beer and girls. It had nothing to do with music, And I was like, well, to some degree, I suppose that's why old guys get into rock and roll. But I remember that music video was put me kind of on the map in places that you couldn't be, Sure, we played Seattle or San Francisco or Los Angeles, and then kind of cut across into Phoenix and into Texas and the major cities, and New York and Florida and Boston. But for God's sake, you couldn't get to Butte, Montana or Boise, Idaho or, East Bumfuck, Oklahoma, but that video could get there, and that was, I think, the thing that we thought gave us opportunity. So I think that we were, at the time excited based on that. And when I look back, I say, man, to this day, there's still some guys that are hanging around and girls that are Thrash fans for, a 25-year period. And, that video was released in 1987. So we're, roughly 27 years ago. And they say, man, I remember that first video. And I said, and they'll say something like, I was living in Boomtown, Ohio. And I was like, I don't even know it. And well, nobody does. But I saw that video, and that's how an Overkill thing. And, to me, I say, man, what a great opportunity for a bunch of ruleless anarchists at the time.
Awesome. Now, let me sort it out here again. There was a long period where you didn't tour the West Coast, according to the information I have. But when you did tour again in 2005, it went so well that you ended up on the 2006 Gigantour. What was that experience like for you?
Well, it really had very little to do with us not touring. Nobody was touring the West Coast, including West Coast bands. You have to understand there's an appendix to this story, and that appendix is the fact that, maybe somewhere around 1993 or 4 or 5, the West Coast became not good for Overkill. But it became not good for guys on the fucking West Coast, too, unless you were in the Big Four. So it wasn't like all one or two shows because they lived in fucking San Francisco. So, but we were still touring and forging on while a lot of these guys went back and worked for mom and dad. But we were killing it from the fucking half of the country to the east, you know, and we were doing more shows than ever. So the West Coast promoters were just out of this whole scene at this time.
Yeah.
And that's why, you know, and that's why bands like Death Angel and Exodus went away. It's just impossible for them to even get, you know, really great gigs around our own places. But Overkill was still fucking, we were still banging on the door. So sure, it was hard to tour out there, but it wasn't just hard for Overkill, where it was like, oh, poor Overkill can't tour the West Coast. Let me tell you something. We were touring the whole rest of the fucking world minus Australia and the West Coast. Everything else, if you put it in perspective, we were doing pretty fucking good to be one of those 8 touring bands, you know, at that level in thrash metal.
Fantastic. Now, this leads me to my next point. You've released albums constantly over the years, with 3 years being the longest period between releases. Now, that's what you call working hard. How have you kept up with that schedule?
Well, you know, I think it's part of the men. You know, I mean, the men are what they are. It's, my partner Dee Dee and I have known each other since '81. You know, I remember meeting Dee Dee and saying, "Geez, I'll never hang out with this fucking guy again. What a little bastard." You know, but you know, the other side of it, I'm going to myself, what a great work ethic. And why am I attracted to other things that this fucking guy does music with? And I remember talking to his wife recently. We were actually doing a thing called 70,000 Tons of Metal.
Yeah.
It's a cruise, and the wives were there, and we're all hanging around. It's really more of a social event, you know, where there's like cocktails and the pinkies are out, and you know, the whole thing sometimes, and the girls are having a great time. But she's a great girl, Dee's wife, and she said to me, you know, she goes, Bobby, you know, it's so funny. Nobody would have ever picked you and Dee Dee to be, you know, this close for this long. But when I look at it, I say you have the same background. You have the same upbringing. You're brought up in the same area. You have the same work values. Sure, our parents were white-collar people, but the other side was they still blue-collar work ethic in us. So the idea is that, hey, man, you want to be a bait salesman on the end of the pier selling worms or bait to go shark fishing? Just be the best fucking bait salesman you can possibly be. And this is what we knew, you know, as kids. And I think that that's probably one of the reasons that this has worked. And this has worked is that blue-collar, instilled East Coast, Northeast work ethic that we have in the United States.
Excellent. Do you like recording?
I do. I mean, I do because it's always, you know, one of the things that I think is most relevant for Overkill. Overkill will not stop learning. We have guys in this band that, you know, their eyebrow always raises up when something new comes along. Whether it be a riff, whether it be a sound, whether it be gear, whether it be technology, whether it be, you know, everybody's looking to make themselves better. So if you're trying to make yourself better, I mean, obviously you want to get the playing field again. You want to get the pitch, for fuck's sake, you know? You don't want to be sitting on the sidelines saying, oh, hey, listen, I have a great history, but I also have a bad back, so I don't want to get out there and play the game. Well, fucking bullshit. I mean, you know, my feeling is if you're learning and you're getting better or trying to learn and trying to get better, you always have something to offer that's relevant in the day. If I stop learning, yeah, man, we can do this interview next year. And I say, well, hey, Mel, I stopped learning, but I'm still proud to be allowed. Then we're really talking about my history, aren't we? Or our history, as opposed to what our present or possible future is. So that's really the excitement. So sure, we love to record. I mean, that's a great opportunity, and I think that we're opportunists.
What about touring? How much do you enjoy touring?
I do. I mean, it's, you know, it's so hard for me to say it this way, but it's probably the truth. I mean, I got high back in the early 80s, you know, and I've been chasing that motherfucking high like a junkie. You know, I'm running and I'm going after it and I'm trying to make it happen and I'm trying to get it again. you know, you don't want to put me on the road for 3 months or 2 months, but man, you put me out there for a good 28 days or 35 days, I can make it happen because I love that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Now, Overkill has been a band that has been heralded, not by me, but by others, for saying, geez, I mean, will these guys just slow down for God's sake? I mean, they're just, you know, it's almost like they got the best drugs on the block or something, you know, and it's, you know, my idea about this is that, you know, when you start getting high, and this is the best high you've ever had, it's really easy. The mind accepts it, the body follows. So I think that, you know, I've always been really proud of the fact that, you know, this is a band that's never taken anyone's money on any continent because we were too tired. So I love touring, of course.
Right. Now, Overkill have been through a few members over the years, but the current lineup's been pretty stable now for a few years. Has that made the whole process easier?
Well, sure. You know, a gelled lineup is, you know, a great asset. You know, and the guys are having a good time. You know, I did a few interviews yesterday, and it, you know, it came to me when a cat asked me about the lineup, and I said, you know, it's not really discussion. It's more like a nod and a wink. You know, I mean, you know. You know, you feel like, you know, you feel like you've planned a bank robbery. You know, that kind of a thing. So you don't talk too much about it in public. You just kind of nod and wink.
Yeah.
So, you know, the idea I think with Overkill is that we have something special with Joe and lineup. And even my wife says, you know, when you guys get together, it's much like a middle-aged boys club. All your work is done prior. You know, you go out there, you roll dice, you sip cognac, you smoke Cuban cigars, you lose each other's money to each other. It's like hanging out with these old rock and roll guys from the 70s. You know, it's like hanging out with Led Zeppelin. You guys think you make fortunes. Well, the idea is I think the nod and the wink works because when we are together and we get back out on the road, it's a good time. There's a lot of laughs and there's a lot of funny pictures and a couple of guys go home poor, lose their money.
Right. Now, you've got a new album, White Devil Armory, being released very shortly. How do you feel about this new album?
Well, I'm happy with the results. You know, it's always hard to get my head around something that's so fresh. I mean, that's 17 records, you know, and I'm just sitting here. You be sitting in your kitchen, I'm sitting in my kitchen, and I'd be a liar to tell you it was the best thing since, you know, Australia found a way to put beer in cans. I mean, I can't tell you that. I can tell you we're satisfied with it. I can tell you that it has teeth. I can tell you we went in with, you know, we went in on 10, and a couple of guys pushed to 10.5 and 11. And that's kind of the way of the Overkill process, you know. I mean, you know, if I'm going to preach and try to sell the idea that we're relevant in 2014, my best evidence or my best backup is, hey, man, just push play. It's just that simple. So I think that we have something here that's special. I can't go into it any deeper because, again, I have 17 records, so it's hard to choose between your kids and say which is the good one, the smart one, the athletic one, and the ugly one.
What are your favourite tracks on the album? Mine is Pig, for starters.
Well, Pig is, you know, one of the things about Pig that I really liked was, you know, I spoke of that punk rock background that we had. And fuck, man, I went to Manhattan College in the city. And I went there because the punk rock thing was happening. I mean, you can go down to a place called St. Lawrence, which is 8th Street over on the east side of Manhattan, where the Mud Club was, and there was always like little chic boutiques, and you know, running through the Ramones, drinking beers out of bags. You know, I mean, this is where we came from. And one of the things that I hear in Pig is that kind of a riff. Especially at the beginning. It's that old rock and roll, punk rock type of a riff that Overkill has incorporated into its life. You know, I mean, we're a thrash metal band, we're a metal band, but for God's sake, we got punk cousins somewhere in there. It's in the bloodline. And I think Pig shows that, especially through of the main riff of the song. And one of my favorite songs.
Fantastic. What sort of tour are Overkill going to be going on to promote this album? Where's the tour going?
Well, we're doing all the European whorehouses. So it's going to be small audiences, but it's going to be unbelievable responses. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say this right on the radio. But what we're going to do is we're going to start in the U.S. in September. Prior to that, we have one festival called Heavy MTL. We're one of the best North American festivals, maybe the best. We're on the Metallica Day. We're playing with Anthrax on there. These are all friends of ours too, the Anthrax guys. After that, we start in the States in September. We do a thing called Cross Power. There's a token thrash band on the Cross Power Festival.
Okay.
And then we do a tour through September. By the end of October, we're in Europe, which brings us into November. Some South American, Central American stuff to Arabian book. Really the second European and U.S. month that is being booked at this time. We're knocking on the Australian door. I also want to get over to New Zealand. Love doing the Asian theater. Have missed China, Thailand, but have done Korea and Japan. So we're looking at that whole kind of a vibe. Yeah, South America, so I think we'd be busy boys, huh?
You're going to be absolutely knackered by the end of that.
You know, it's not such a bad thing, you know, and let me tell you something. I'm a guy that's in a rock and roll band or a heavy metal band, and I also import chocolates from Europe. So when somebody comes up to me and goes, "Hey, Blitz, how's it going?" I'm like, "What are you fucking kidding me? It's rock and roll chocolate."
Oh, Bobby, it's been absolutely magnificent to talk to you today. I'd really like to thank you for sharing your life with us here in Adelaide.
Hey, man, it's always good to talk to Down Under. We had one experience there, and it's always been memorable. And I'd like to end it like this. Hey, what do you say? This is Bobby Blitz from Overkill. That's right. I'm proud to be loud.
Oh, Bobby, fantastic.
Now, my pleasure. Thanks for taking the time for me.
Oh, thank you for taking the time and enjoy, and we hope to see you down here.
All right, Morgan. Look forward.
Thanks, mate. Okay, bye.